the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to say something about high conflict divorce. When you're in a high conflict divorce, trying to co-parent productively for your kids is very, very challenging. And I can't think of a better coach than Sherry Morris to help you with these issues. Whether you and your ex decide to go see Sherry as a couple to learn about co-parenting productivity, or you want to see Sherry by yourself to deal with a difficult ex, I think Sherry truly shines in changing your life and your kids' lives for the better. Sherry Morris is an attorney turned high conflict and co-parenting coach. She's the founder of Dear Divorce Coach, her practice, and the creator of Co-Parenting Compass, an online parenting program. I love Sherry. I've known her for a few years. I trust her so much. She's amazing and has the best reputation in the business. If you want to learn more, you can find her at deardivorcecoach.com. I also want to tell you about a wonderful company called Rebranding Divorce. They specialize in resources for after divorce. I'm talking courses, memberships, workshops, retreats, trips. The two women who founded this, Carolyn Billiak and Mimi Sullivan, are an amazing duo. They're both divorced and they are just great ladies. And they're so motivated to help people after divorce, to help them embrace the limitless opportunities, rebrand their life, help them become even more relevant with age, and demonstrate joy, freedom, abundance, adventure, and the power of women working together. Wow, I love that. If you want to learn more about Rebranding Divorce, go to rebrandingdivorce.com. You can also find both Rebranding Divorce and Sherry Morris in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. I can't even count the number of times I have been asked by people going through a divorce, and they've said, "Do you think I'm going to be able to stay in my house?" It's like that is the biggest concern, and rightfully so. And there are so many reasons for that. So today I have a great guest who's going to talk about how you can actually keep your house if that's what you want. My guest is Jeff Landers, and Jeff is a CDLP, a CDFA. He also has 40 years of combined experience when it comes to real estate, mortgage, and divorce. And Jeff, I love this. Since 2010, he has helped over 700 people all over the U.S. through the financial complexities of their divorce. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Jackie, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I am awesome, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for
So
having
in
me.
your 40 years of experience, well, it hasn't been 40. Well, yeah, right? About 40 years.
Combined, yeah, sure.
Okay. Don't you agree with me that people say, I just want to stay in my house?
A lot of them do, without question. I mean, it's often the largest asset in divorce. And in many instances, especially if there's still minor children, they would like to keep the home if possible. Divorce is disruptive enough, and then to have to start packing and moving and taking the kids out of school and away from their friends, it just adds another component and just makes a difficult situation that much more difficult. But again, it depends on the circumstances. I've had people tell me, no, the house is nothing but bad memories for me, and I want no part of it. I want to sell it. So
Or I can't afford it. I'm so looking forward to a small, easy home. I've heard that too.
right. I don't need 5 bedrooms and 3 baths, I've got 1 kid in college or, whatever. So, but I would say that definitely more than 50%, would like to keep the home because the many cases, especially now where, property values have gone up so much, people are saying, "If I sell, what am I gonna be able to buy? I may never be able to buy another home, or I'm gonna have to get something so small, it's not practical." So again, there are a lot of variables, but I would say 50 and probably a lot more, maybe 50 to, 50% to 2/3 would like to keep the home if it's at all possible to do.
Okay, so I kind of blew it in the intro and didn't tell the biggest thing about you was that you have this book called
Right.
Divorce House Sense, and it's a book to help people who want to keep their home. So it has like different tips and strategies. And you write that it has what most divorce attorneys and mortgage lenders don't know, how to avoid making costly mistakes,
Right.
and expert insights at your fingertips. So I just want to shout that out because I kind of
I
blew it there at
appreciate
the
it. Yeah,
beginning.
a lot of out of the box ideas that you typically don't hear from other people, and they just may not know about it.
All right, I want to break this down. So let's get into why people really want to stay in their homes. Like you mentioned, children, they don't want their children to be any more traumatized. But I also feel like it's for them. Like our home is our safe place,
Right.
it's the place where you feel safe and comfortable. And when you're getting divorced, there's so much change going on in your life that
That's
you don't
exactly
wanna also have to move.
right. Right. I mean, the whole thought while you're dealing with attorneys, while you're dealing with, whatever trauma your kids might have, if there's still, then on top of everything that's going on, now you're going to start packing up the house, looking for a new place, dealing with the sale of the property, maybe buying something else or renting something else. It's for many people, it can be just too much to do while this whole traumatic divorce and even if you're amicable with your spouse, it's still traumatic. I mean, I think I told you, Jackie, I was married for 34 years. I went through a divorce several years ago. I'm still good friends with my ex, but you know what? It was traumatic for both of us to
Right,
go through
right,
after that period of time as amicable as it was. So,
right, and I really wanna talk about your divorce too, but I wanna also, tell my listeners that, like, how about changing all your addresses on stuff and your bills and setting up the utilities? I mean, I've moved a lot lately, that's
I
this is all so fresh. It's a lot.
it
And if
it
you're
is.
dealing with that emotional trauma of getting divorced at that time, that is really difficult. And so that could be a reason alone where somebody wants to stay in their home.
Right, and the subtitle and the tagline of my company is "Move on, not out." So, obviously, you're going through a divorce, you wanna be able to move on, but for many, many reasons, you may not wanna move out. Why? Because it's still a great asset. You're paying down the mortgage every month, which means you're increasing your equity in the home every month. Hopefully, you're in an area. I mean, prices, especially during the last 3 to 4 years, in some areas, they tripled or even, well, doubled or tripled in value. So I've had many people say, this is my retirement fund. When I get there, hopefully 10 years, 15 years, 20, whatever it is, this house is going to be worth a lot. And this is my retirement fund.
Okay. And another reason I just thought of something else. What about if your home is in a great location where you're close to your job, you're close to your gym, I've
Oh,
had so many people say, my gym is my safe place. I love my gym.
right.
No, you don't want to go join a new gym
I
or
have friends in the neighborhood.
right, right. You
Yep,
see people, you're waving, you're
yep.
walking your dog.
No,
It's
absolutely.
a big deal to move. But
Right.
let's also get into the one reason that I always tell people sell your house, you shouldn't stay there. And tell me if I'm right, Jeff, is when they say that they're they don't say it in these words, but they're saying like I'm going to be house poor. Like you don't want to spend all your money on your home so that you don't have any spending money and you can't take trips and you can't, right? I mean, that would be my biggest
Well,
reason for
that
selling.
again, that's a decision, and it depends what the timeline is. I mean, many people might say, depending on the age of the children, I want to keep the house, and in 5 years, when my youngest graduates from high school, I'll sell it then, and then I'll have the money to go on vacation or take trips or do other. So I mean the interesting thing, and for all the years that I've been involved in working with people going through a divorce, every case is different. Okay, people make different amounts of money. They've been married for a different period of time. They have kids. They don't have kids. They have a house. Some houses are 300,000. Others are 10 million. Every situation is different. So the rationale to keep the home could be different for different people depending on what their scenario is.
You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Today, we're talking about keeping your home in your divorce. My guest is Jeff Landers, CDLP, CDFA, founder of Divorce House Sense, which is the name of his new book. And Jeff and I are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to get into what you should do if you have that question. I don't know if I can keep my house. So we'll be right back. When I was getting divorced, it felt like there were so many legal terms being thrown at me, and I didn't have a clue what they meant. My lawyer only had time to explain things about the process and what we were negotiating really, really briefly. I found myself intimidated, scared, and anxious throughout the process. And the bottom line was I needed to be educated. There was nothing out there back then to help break down the divorce process into an easy to understand way and help me gain clarity in decision making. Well, guess what? Now there's something. Kimberly Miller is the founder of her company, Partwise. She's a divorce attorney, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and a certified financial planner. She's all of those three things and decided to take all of her experience and turn it into Partwise, her divorce education platform that literally is amazing. I'm so excited about it because when you join Partwise, you can educate yourself on everything as you move through the divorce process. You're going to find answers to any question you have, which is going to help you spend so much less time and money with your divorce attorney. And you're going to end up with such a better divorce outcome because you'll be able to make decisions so much better because you'll know what's going on. I love, love, love Partwise. If you want to learn more, you can go to part-wise.com. I also want to tell you about a wonderful financial advisor named Craig Richmond. Craig and I have known each other for a few years, maybe like 4 or 5 years. And this is funny. Craig has been a financial advisor since 1979. Not only is it funny, but it's wonderful because he has so much experience and he decided to develop a niche in helping women after divorce in 2014. So he's been doing this for 10, 11 years. Craig's a great, great guy. He's so personable. And I think when it comes to finances, you need someone who's going to listen to you and listen to what you want your lifestyle to be like. Love Craig. Really, really think you should call him if you need help in this area. Go to richmondcm.com and you can find both Craig and part-wise in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Are you wanting to keep your home, but you're not sure if you can? That's what we're talking about today. My guest is Jeff Landers, author of his book, Divorce House Sense, which you can get on Amazon and where else, Jeff?
Not Amazon, only my website, divorcehousesense.com.
Oh, okay. Good to know. That's pretty important. So go to divorcehousesense.com. And if you get the book and you're in the checkout, put in the code DGS for Divorce Girl Smiling and you get $2 off. All right. So, Jeff, let's say someone's listening and they're like, okay, you just told me all the reasons I should keep my house. I want to keep my house. How do I do that? What would you tell someone and what's in the book?
Well, the very first thing that I would tell someone is start as early as possible in the process. Bring in an expert such as myself that could go through your assets, that could go everything. Because the most important thing is to determine whether this is feasible or not. I mean, I've known so many situations where, you're negotiating back and forth between the attorneys to keep the home. You're spending a lot of time, you're spending a lot of money on legal bills, and the end result is there's no way in heck that they're going to be able to do it. Or as you said before, they're going to give up so many other assets that they're going to be house rich and cash poor. And you know what all financial advisors say, you should have at least 6 months of emergency fund. What happens if the roof needs to be repaired? That could be 30, 40 grand alone. Are you going to have the money to do that? And that reminds me, another important thing, even though you might have lived in the house for many years, before make any final decision, get a house inspection as if you were buying the house from scratch, okay? From, the roof to the foundation, find out if there's anything, that might need a repair in a year or two. Is the roof in good shape? Is the boiler okay? The hot water heater? The last thing you want is to take on this responsibility all yourself, and in 2 years, you got a $30,000 roof replacement. And if you find that out ahead of time, that's something you could negotiate with your spouse is, okay, do we deduct that from what I have to buy you out? Because I'm going to have to face that in a couple of years. So that's critically important. And most people don't even think about that.
No, they don't. And how much does a house inspection cost if you had to guess?
I would say, I mean, obviously it depends on the square footage of the house and all of that. I don't know, 1,000 plus or minus.
Okay. And you could even put that in the deal and say, I paid for this inspection too. Okay. All right.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
so what I like to do is work backwards. Okay, the first thing you need to do is figure out how much equity you have in the home. Now, the simple way to do that, you could either get an appraisal. I mean, people go on Zillow and Redfin. Those are rough approximations. Often they're wrong. But I mean, just let's say for the sake of back of the envelope calculations, what's the house currently worth? Subtract the mortgages you have. I mean, some people have a mortgage, a HELOC, or whatever, any liens on the property. And then when you subtract that from the value of the house, that typically is the equity in the home, which is typically divided 50-50. But what I must say, it's not always that simple. For example, the date of separation, maybe you filed for divorce 2 years ago, and now you're trying to figure it out. You may need to get a special appraisal called a historical appraisal or a retrospective, where they'll come up with the value of the home, what it was 2 years ago. And then you need to see what was the mortgage balance 2 years ago and subtract that. And that's the equity that you're dividing.
Wow. Okay, Jeff, you're getting really technical. This is where your 40 years of combined
Mhm.
experience is coming in. I didn't know any of this.
And I'll throw another one your way. Let's say one spouse owned the home prior to marriage. Okay, so they're the ones that put down the down payment, maybe paid off the mortgage, paid the mortgage down for a period of time. Then you get married. You both move into the home. Now you're paying the mortgage and reducing the mortgage with marital funds. Okay. Maybe you do some renovations or whatever. So the equity, each one of the 50 states has a different way to calculate what part is marital and which still remain premarital because somebody owned the home prior to that. So those are complications, but I mean, to keep things sort of simple and not really get into the weeds here, let's just assume that the amount of the equity is current value minus your current mortgage balance. That's your equity. Assume that you divided 50-50. Nobody says that if you go in front of a judge, yeah, it'll probably be 50-50. But, if you're somewhat amicable and you're negotiating with your spouse, I mean, there's no reason it couldn't be 40-60 or 60-40. That's just subject to negotiation. So now based upon this, how much you need to buy out your spouse. Now the next question is, where do you get that money?
Yes. Okay. So tell me, so the listeners can either read your book
Yep.
or they can go to a CDLP, or can financial advisors help?
Well, even before you go to a CDLP, because a CDLP, will certainly help, but you need to. Sometimes things aren't straightforward. Like I just said, even figuring out, what's the equity in the home. So you need to figure out where you're going to come up with the money first, and you need to put together a list of all of your assets, okay, and then talk with your divorce attorney to get some sort of expectation of what you might get as your share of the other assets.
I see.
And now you start the negotiation because let's say the total equity is 200,000. So you've got to come up with 100 grand to buy out your spouse. Okay. Well, maybe you own a vacation home that has equity in there too. So you might be able to make a horse trade and say to your spouse, okay, assuming the equity is comparable or whatever, you keep the equity, you keep the vacation home, I'll keep the marital home. That's one way to do it. Or maybe there's a stock portfolio, okay? And maybe your share of the stock portfolio might be 100K. Well, that's sort of an even swap there. Okay, if it's only 50K, then you have to find another $50,000 to come up with. So,
Okay. So
yeah.
for people who are listening,
Mhm.
are really new at this, I'm gonna just give you my take on how it's done, and then Jeff, you tell me if I'm right because you're the one with the credentials. But I went through a divorce too, and this is what it was. Basically, they take all of everything you both have, but it only marital assets. Okay, so if you're listening to this, you got to look up what's marital and what isn't. Like if you have an inheritance that's just in your name and you've never combined the money with your spouse, that's your money. That's not put into the mix.
Right, separate
Okay.
property.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you take all marital property, including the value of any homes or and assets or boats or whatever you have,
Mhm.
stock portfolios, insurance policy, quadros, and all that, right?
Well, yeah, quadro's not an asset. The quadro is how you would divide a
I mean,
401k.
401ks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So then you take that and then you take it from the day you got married until now. What's
Well,
it
until the
worth?
date of separation, which could
Okay,
be
date of
now or
separation.
right.
And then you just cut it in half. So let's say everything together equals 1,500,000. Each of you are getting 750,000. That might mean the house. That might mean maybe that's all you're going to get is your house because you have $750,000 in the house, right?
Right.
So that's how it's done. And that took me, like when I was getting divorced, I didn't really realize that. So I just wanted to explain that. Okay, so
Yeah.
Jeff, let's talk about if you decide, let's say that you're going to keep the house and you started to say, "Now where do you get the money?"
Right. So, okay, so let's go back to what you said. So, if you went in front of a judge, It would probably be divided 50-50 exactly the way you said. Anything that you had acquired before marriage, like a 401k, maybe your 401k is worth 200,000 now, but when you got married, you already had 50 grand. So you would only be dividing 150 because you could keep that. Okay. One word of caution though, some states do not necessarily recognize separate property. I believe Connecticut is one of those that they can, even though it's your separate property, depending on the case and the situation, a judge might order you to split your separate property. Maybe there's not enough marital property or something else going on. So there are some states where that's sort of a gray area that definitely separate property is yours. But in general, yeah, that's pretty much true. But again, you could horse trade. So even if we stick with the 50-50, that's in the aggregate. That doesn't mean, let's say the 401k can't be split 70-30 or 30-70, and whereas you split something else in a different ratio, maybe when you add everything all together, it still adds up to 50-50 for both spouses. But if it's amicable, there's no reason why it couldn't be 60-40 or something different. It's not in granite that it absolutely must be 50-50 as long as it's mutually acceptable and you're negotiating with your spouse and you're not in court.
Okay, or negotiating with a mediator. So if you're in
Yes.
mediation, you can do these, as you're calling them, horse trades. You can do
Right.
whatever you want, really.
Right.
But if you're in litigation, you're probably going to end up with the 50-50.
Oh, if you're in litigation, it might very well be that the judge says sell the home.
Mhm.
Okay. And many in my experience, so I've done over 700 cases, which means I've dealt with over 700 divorce attorneys. Some attorneys just say, you know what? The easiest thing to do, just sell the home, be done with it, whatever. But but you're saying, but I want to keep my home. So that's not a viable answer. The other horse trading would be, let's say you're the one that wants to keep the home, and you're also going to be the recipient of alimony and child support. Maybe you don't have enough assets, or you won't have enough assets to buy out the full amount, the full 100,000 that we talked about. Well, if you don't need all of that alimony income in order to qualify for the mortgage, because you have to have a certain level of income in order to qualify, you may say to your spouse, you know what? Instead of giving me 5 grand a month for X period of time, give me 3,500, and in return for that, instead of me having to come up with 100,000, I only need to come up with 60. So those are all the things that I do when I'm working with a client to figure out all these different possible ways to see if it's feasible, because there's really two steps in keeping your house. One, can you buy your spouse out of their share of the equity, and how are you going to do that? And two, can you qualify for refinancing of the mortgage? Now, if you're the one that wants to keep the home and your name is already solely on the mortgage, it's not joint with your spouse and it's not just in your spouse's name, but it's solely in, then you don't need to refinance. Then it becomes easier. Then all you have to do is figure out how to buy out your spouse's share, and you're done. But in many cases, the mortgage might be joint, you might be both on it, and then one spouse is going to want to get their name off of the mortgage because you're buying them out. Now they're going to be obligated on a mortgage for a home they no longer own or co-own.
Right. But well, what a lot of people are doing now are loan assumptions. So where they just take over what.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second.
Okay, wait, before you get into loan assumptions, because I thought they were the greatest thing ever invented, because then you can just take over the mortgage. But
Yeah, those
I
are
want to
very
tell my
limited.
listeners, Jeff just made a great point, a great argument of why mediation is better than litigation in a divorce. This is just another reason. So, Jeff, my listeners know in almost every podcast, I'm always like, if you can mediate, try to do it. I don't care how much you hate your ex. Mediation is so much better. And this is just another reason because you have a better chance of keeping your house because you can, in Jeff's words, do the horse trades and come up with all these creative solutions to make both people happy.
Going in front of a judge is your absolute last resort, okay? Because you never know what a judge is going to do. They have very wide discretion in a divorce. Maybe the judge had a fight with their own spouse that morning and they're in a lousy mood, or they saw you roll your eyes and now they're pissed off at you, or they don't like the tie your attorney's wearing. I mean, there's so many variables. They
Right.
actually did a study of cases that were decided before lunch and after lunch, and those cases before lunch when the judge was hungry usually had a more adverse decision than after lunch when the judge had some so, I mean, it's all these crazy
That's
variables.
so sad.
But
That's
it's true,
awful.
they're human beings, okay? They have their own prejudices, maybe you have a judge that's paying a lot in alimony, himself and is, resentful of that. Well, you don't think psychologically that might affect cases? It might,
Right.
they're supposed to be impartial, but, they're human, so
Okay, Jeff, we're kind of running out of time, and I want to ask you, tell me about the loan assumption thing, because you were
okay.
shaking your head like you don't believe in that.
Well, I'll tell you why. So there are certain government loans, like an FHA and VA loans, are assumable provided you qualify. Conventional loans, most conventional loans, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, I don't wanna say they're not assumable, but in 98% of the cases, they're not, okay? And there's a good reason, if you're paying 2.5 or 3% mortgage now, and, it's now a little bit under 7%, they have no incentive, to let you assume,
Right. No one makes any money.
nobody makes any money, and not only that, their risk is greater because now it's just gonna be you on the mortgage instead of 2 people that are gonna be responsible, and especially if both people have their own income. So now you're gonna come in with less income, just yourself. It's more risky for the bank, and now they can't get the higher interest rate. So I mean, some services will do it, but I would say that between 95 to 98% of conventional, they're not gonna do an assumption.
Well, what I have heard, and you probably know better than me, but have heard of people doing it, but they had to jump through hoops and it took 6 to 9 months to
6
get
to
it.
9 months, and sometimes at the end of the 6 to 9 months, when you finally get a decision, they say no. So you just lost a lot of time, and again, it depends, what is your settlement agreement? How much time do you have? I mean, we could go into more detail maybe at another time, but many times, in order for alimony and child support to count as qualified income, if you're receiving that, you have to receive it for at least 6 months prior to applying for the mortgage, and it has to continue for 36 months thereafter. I've seen many settlement agreements that say you've got 90 days or 120 days to refi. If not, you have to list the home for sale. Well, if you have to receive your alimony and child support for 6 months, that's 180 days, and you're only getting in the settlement agreement 90 or 120, you're not gonna be able to accomplish that unless you start getting temporary support as early as possible, in the negotiation, so you start that clock ticking. But that doesn't happen that often,
Yeah.
especially go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, all of this amazing advice, is it all in your book?
Yes,
Uh,
and a
yeah.
lot more. The book is over 200 pages, so
Okay.
there's a lot of good information in there.
So I was just going to tell my listeners the book is called Divorce House Sense. Go to divorcehousesense.com, put DGS in your cart and the coupon code, you get $2 off. This is the best money that you'll spend because then you'll be able to educate yourself and you'll know what questions to ask. You'll be able to be empowered to make the right decisions. And this is a really big one. So, Jeff, we're out of time. I wish I could talk more about this. I'm loving the conversation.
Right.
Thank you so much for taking time to be on the show.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much.
And as I said, go to divorcehousesense.com, and you can also find Jeff and his book in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling, which is divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you real soon.